Hello and welcome to Australian Badge Guides by Mark Taylor. The epic story of the Anzacs at Gallipoli continues. Today's episode is about the Dardanelles campaign during the Great War. Australia's fundraising badges sold on the home front will be used to further illustrate the campaign. The Dardanelles is a stretch of water 60 kilometres long and ranging between 1.5 and 6 kilometres wide. In ancient times, the straits were known as Hellespont or the Sea of Helle. In Greek legend, the girl named Helle, together with her brother Phreus, were about to be killed as a human sacrifice, but were miraculously rescued by a ram with a golden fleece and which could also fly. The ram took the children on their back and flew northwards from Greece. Unfortunately, Helle fell into the sea, hence explaining why it was called the Sea of Helle. The Hellespont connects the Aegean Sea in the southwest to the Sea of Marmora and the Black Sea in the northeast, and has always been regarded as the boundary between Europe and Asia. The traditional crossing point of the Dardanelles is the Narrows, where the two shores are just 1,500 metres apart. The Dardanelles campaign, therefore, was about attacking and capturing Constantinople, today called Istanbul, the Turkish capital of the then Ottoman Empire. The strategic objective? To force Turkey to capitulate and withdraw from the war. This would then open once more the Russian seaports, providing the Russians with the means of receiving vital Allied resupply in their eastern campaign against the Germans, while also opening another front for the Allies to attack from, this time from southeastern Europe, thereby further relieving pressure from the deadlock on the Western Front in France and Belgium, and further diluting concentrated German military power, forcing it to fight, theoretically, on three fronts. It was Winston Churchill, the then 39-year-old First Lord of the British Admiralty, a post which he incidentally held since 1911, who devised the Dardanelles campaign. Churchill, of course, would later become the Prime Minister of Britain in the dark days of World War II, when Britain stood alone against Hitler's Nazi war machine. Churchill developed the plan to open up the Dardanelles as part of a flanking manoeuvre to win the Great War, notwithstanding the lack of political and military support from Lord Kitchener, the Secretary of State for War in the British Cabinet. Kitchener was, of course, the figure used in the iconic, much since imitated 1914 Lord Kitchener Wants You poster, directing the young men of Britain to enlist in the war, which they did in large numbers. Kitchener was a professional soldier who saw pre-war action in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 71, and where Paris was laid waste. He also served in the Sudan, Khartoum, Egypt, and in the Boer War. He served in the British Army from 1871 until his death in 1916. He also served in India, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. Kitchener believed France and Belgium to be the main theatres of the war, where the decisive battles would be waged. Interestingly, there had been a report prepared by the British General Staff in 1906, which had assessed the viability of an amphibious attack, combining naval and military forces, and this report had prophetically concluded, as it would transpire, that any such attack on Turkey via the Dardanelles was unlikely to be successful militarily. Further, Lieutenant General Sir William Birdwood the subsequent ANZAC commander, is reported to have believed that the Royal Navy alone would not prove decisive in the Dardanelles campaign. On 19 February 1915, the Allied campaign in the Dardanelles began with the Royal Navy, including the super dreadnought, the Queen Elizabeth, bombarding the Narrows and the modern Turkish gun emplacements overlooking the Dardanelles. However, the naval gunfire failed to lay waste to the bulk of the Turkish forts, which were well positioned and concealed. During the ensuing firefight, the Allied Sea Fleet was not able to close with their targets due to the sea mines laid by the Turks in the waters around the peninsula, further exposing the inadequacy of Allied minesweeping operations. As a result, the Turks were able to inflict losses on the Allied fleet. On 18 March 1915, the French cruiser, the Bouvet, was sunk with the loss of 97% of its crew. In fact, 1/3 of the Allied naval fleet was sunk or disabled by the Turkish mines and gun emplacement artillery on that fateful day, which is still revered as a day of remembrance in Turkey. It should be noted that the Australian AE2 submarine was the first Allied submarine to penetrate the Narrows of the Dardanelles. It was after the Allied shipping losses that it was decided upon an amphibious land invasion involving the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, commanded by General Sir Ian Hamilton and supported by the Royal Navy. Shown here is the Anzac Day badge produced by the US-based Anzac War Relief Fund in 1941. The design embodies a kangaroo typifying Australia and fern leaves to represent New Zealand. As well, there is the Southern Cross star constellation seen in the night skies of both countries. The badge also incorporates the crown, symbolising the connection between Australia, New Zealand and Great Britain. The Australian Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Robert Menzies, was presented with a badge in honour of his being patron of the Anzac War Relief Fund. Thank you for watching. For the best in information about Australia's fundraising badges issued on the home front to support the Australian war effort, please like, subscribe and share. For further information about Australian Badge Guide books, including e-books for people living outside Australia, please use the links in the description. The epic story of the Anzacs at Gallipoli continues. Coming up, the initial naval campaign has failed.